The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Charles and Dom, who are sick, I'm going to say. They're sick today. In their place is producer Lachlan pulling an episode from the vault. And from the vault today, we're going to pull a special episode of War Stories, which you can always go back and listen to. But in case you don't want to scroll up that far, we're pulling one out for you today. And the episode today is the one where none other than Craig Reucassel joins Charles and Dom to reminisce about all of the times they used to catch up politicians, big politicians like prime ministers and prime minister candidates, including, as I look on the details of this episode, Mark Latham. Now, I wasn't alive when all this was going on, but Mark Latham was a prime minister candidate? What the hell? Who let that happen? When I look at Mark Latham now, I see a guy whose head could be sold as an air fryer and it would still work just as well. The fact that Mark Latham could have been prime minister, that's bad. So, if nothing, listen to this episode and feel ashamed of yourself for even almost letting that happen right after this.
So did things ever go unexpectedly right other than, I guess we talked about the Wentworth Hotel and the way that you somehow emerged on the floor of the whole thing.
I guess it's about, because so often we would prepare these things based on things going wrong. So the Apex stunt's a classic example of that. Like, you know, the whole premise of it was that we're obviously not going to get through security.
Yes.
So Chaz is dressed as Osama bin Laden as a kind of comedic punchline.
Yeah. So we get something out of it.
He gets stopped and he gets out and goes, "What do you mean? Well, how come I can't get in?"
I'm a world leader.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, you know, it went surprisingly well and got through and, you know, that can sometimes happen. But it is funny how, you know, you prepare all these different steps to things and, you know, comedic things, but you often didn't really think about the second one because you think the first one's going to not work. So there's an example of that where John Howard, the Prime Minister at the time, it was the campaign trail, and he'd been walking around, he'd gone for his morning walk in Melbourne, and he'd walked past a kind of rowing shed where young people were fixing their rowing. What do you call rowing things?
Like throwing skulls or throwing boats or whatever.
Fixing their skulls.
Or oars? What are they
Well, they were just
the boats,
the boats.
Right.
And they'd gone, "Oh, John Howard," or whatever, and they'd gone and they'd given him a big hug, right? And in the vision, there was no malice involved, but the guy who's hugging the Prime Minister has got a screwdriver in his hand. And it was pointed out at the time by people that maybe the security, you know, that's not the greatest thing for security if you're Prime Minister.
He's got federal police guards with him at all times, and they didn't miss the obvious stabbing weapon.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair to the federal police, they were pretty alert to, you know, the kind of malice involved. But that's led to us kind of doing a thing, going, you know, what weapons can you hug the Prime Minister with? Yeah. So we discovered he was going to be in the Gold Coast, and it was great because he was pretty attuned to us at that point. Like he was pretty used to us turning up outside Kirribilli House on his walk. Yes. But he wasn't necessarily used to seeing us elsewhere. So first up, I went out with a gigantic axe. When I say gigantic, like I mean bigger than me, like about a 7 foot.
Yeah, it's like a kind of medieval staff thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's on his walk and going, oh, and so I walked up to him with this going, "Oh, Prime Minister, can I give a hug? Can I give a hug?" And he's like, "Oh, no." And then he actually did. He gave me a hug, right? So, you know, we've got the...
So he passed that test.
He passed the test.
Because it's always good when you have a structure like that, isn't it?
Still, the screwdriver incident did expose holes in the PM security code.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they're cool about screwdrivers, where do they draw the line? I mean, what other implements is it okay to carry when hugging the Prime Minister? I'll give you a handshake.
A handshake? Oh, that's okay.
Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you.
You're right.
Thanks very much. Thanks, good on you.
Yeah, well, this is it. So he's passed that. But then our follow-up one was a chainsaw. And again, not expecting the first one to have really worked. I hadn't really thought through the chainsaw much. We had done one thing which in hindsight was very lucky, and we'd taken the chain off the chainsaw. But the whole point was we're then running towards the Prime Minister trying to
With a chainsaw. And if you're federal police, you've got to make quick decision about whether the Prime Minister's in danger.
It's a great thing.
And was it on? Like, was it?
This is the point. Is that Brad Howard, the director, and I at the time are just basically running towards where the Prime Minister is, having this long argument about whether or not we turn it on, going, it'll be much better, it'll sound much better. And then you're going, but we can put it on in post. We don't have to have it on. It's going to be annoying. Why? We shouldn't put it on.
You won't be able to hear.
Yeah, it's really annoying anyway. So we just get near and we go, it's probably better. So I just go, rum. As soon as the chainsaw went on, I've never seen more federal police just converge immediately. And they were miles away. I didn't get near him for the second time. It's like, okay.
Johnny, he'll hug anyone. He's a tart, isn't he?
He gives good hug. I wanted another one after that.
Well, his security minders know he loves a hug, and by the looks of that, I'm sure they'd let anything past.
Not quite anything.
I was just cutting some trees down. Thanks for the hug.
So the sound of a chainsaw
Not added in post?
did not help. Yes, did not help in any way.
But how did they? Because they must have known who you were by then.
They did, but I think they thought the chainsaw may be a step too far in the comedy. And this is it. Initially they.
But who made them the comedy police?
But it's quite funny because they had figured us out. It got to the point where it was almost like a ritual. And you'd go there in the morning and try and you want to shoot something. Or I remember being dressed as a sheep at one point. I can't remember why, but
I think you were a rabbit, weren't you?
I was a rabbit at one point and a sheep at another point. I don't remember. Anyway, various different dress ups.
This is the example of those things where you look back and go,
what was the satirical premise? It might have been a rabbit. Anyway, there were so many times in one election campaign that we were there. And and the federal police always had a recce person, probably specifically looking for us. So it was always the same guy. And he always said, look, okay, I know you got to get your piece, and that was kind of good to hear. Like, you can have your piece. Just don't make any sudden moves and nothing, no projectiles.
Well,
and that's pretty broad. Like, that's a pretty broad rule.
Well, they were very good about it. And actually, to be fair, in hindsight, you realise this was full credit to John Howard for this because he hated us. He did not engage with us. He just hated to engage with it. He didn't like it.
It was only when he wanted to smash us in some way.
Yeah, but he had a kind of old-fashioned perspective of, well, I'm a politician, this is my job. Part of it is that dickheads are going to come up to me. So he would still do, when the federal police would see, the chaser guys are out there. And one time I had a bus. One time I had a DeLorean car and I was dressed as Doc. Yeah. Like, it was very hard to hide when you
Well, let's just hear the clip of that because that was actually exactly like the tragedy of John Howard's life. Was that you wanted him to go back in time to be able to retire gracefully, and he didn't do it. Let's hear a quick clip from that.
He must be kicking himself that last year he didn't retire while he was still on top.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'm sure if he could go back in time, he'd do things very differently. I mean, I reckon he'd almost certainly choose to retire if he could rewind the clock.
Yeah, all he needs is a time machine. He just thinks, like that crazy Doc guy from Back to the Future. Then he'd be fine. Great Scott, Prime Minister, I brought the DeLorean. I've seen the future. We can go back in time. We can go back a year ago to a time when you could retire on top. Get in the DeLorean, we can go back. You can choose the end. All we need is nuclear power, and it can go back in time. You've got nuclear power. Get in, Prime Minister. Seriously, this is the only opportunity. Or we can go back in time, get rid of work choices, and then you can win anyway. Come on, Prime Minister. Only the flux capacitor can save us now, Prime Minister. It'll change the history books. You love the history. Kids in year 9 and 10 learning about the Prime Minister that stood down at the right time. It's the only chance, Prime Minister. We'll go back to the future. We'll get the legacy. We'll fix it.
The Chaser Report. Now with extra whispers.
And this is the thing, he knew you because you just kept coming up to him all the time.
Isn't it? It's so great to listen to the clips because it reminds you how lame it was. Yeah, that's great. Thanks
visually,
for playing that.
If you imagine we found a real DeLorean. There was a nerd who had his own DeLorean.
Yeah, it was great. He was very good. But the full credit to Hal that he would let us go ahead with it and he would do the same walk. He wouldn't change his walk because we were there, but he was used to us being there. And it was interesting because there was one time I remember we stunted him somewhere else. And he didn't realise it was us. and he got the shits with himself. So it's a very obscure. This is going to people. What's this idea? This is how dumb it was. Do you remember that at the time he got a lot of money from the guy that ran Manildra, like the Liberal Party? The big donor was the guy that ran Manildra, which was a ethanol company, right? And the whole
that's
thing,
why to this day we have E10
that's
petrol.
why we have ethanol in our petrol.
Yeah.
Charles. That's one possible.
Yeah,
Thing that affected the policy that may have it there.
Yeah, he just donated money to make sure we didn't miss the very positive environmental benefits of E10 petrol.
Because as everyone knows, John Howard was a fervent environmentalist. There's no way he was doing it anyway to support a Liberal donor. Yeah. But we had this thing where we were going to give him an ethanol pop.
Oh, that's right.
Which is like,
that one really was the whole idea. One of the most remembered chases gets done to us at ethanol pop.
It's really good to
we love
the
to pun.
Chases. But, the whole idea was that they just wanted to put ethanol in everything. But I remember giving this to him. He was walking into some fundraiser, and he wasn't used to it and he took it off me. And then you saw him register a few beats later that it was me and that it was the chaser stunt. And he got the shits and he threw it on the bench. It was one of the few times I saw a kind of emotional reaction from him about it. It was actually one of the very few. Well, normally he was just like, play it straight, don't react at all. But he got the shits that it was us. And he realised that, oh, damn, I shouldn't have taken that. I didn't realise it them.
Wow.
He was such a pro about it, wasn't he? He really just played it with an absolutely dead bat. Like, he just got nothing.
And it's true. And you were there, Dom. The one time he did talk to us was when he thought it would be politically advantageous to him, which is after the eulogy song had gone to air, which is kind of the whole idea of the song is only, pricks turn into good guys after death. But right at the end of that song, there'd been a gag, and the gag was that essentially you wouldn't do this gag, which is going, Belinda Rama, and then the song stopped.
Everyone stopped Andrew playing.
And Andrew's
like the line you can't cross.
We wouldn't actually do that. Anyway, so there'd been a bit of a public outcry against us, so we were a bit of a pariah at the time. So he thought, this is great because I get to, and then he basically did. We were doing some stunt with him, and he turned it around and went, you guys are a lot funnier when you're not picking on dead people or whatever it was. And you're like, yeah, he did pretty well.
He burned us.
He burned us.
We know you need to pull a rabbit out of your hat. Here's a few. Here's the Prime Minister.
You blokes are a lot funnier when you pick on somebody who's alive.
Prime Minister, you're alive, Prime Minister.
And I think we were dressed at that time as rabbits. And I think it was an incredibly dumb idea too. So in many ways, we were already burning.
Yeah, no.
He just pissed on us.
It wasn't a good look. And strange thing was, I don't have...
Did that make it to air? Like, did you...
Yeah, well, we made it the news. The news cameras were there. That's how it made it already.
Yeah.
And people were going, oh, he got the chaser good. But I don't generally use the word Mark Latham, slick political operator. Those are not concepts that go together nowadays. But he was actually the most effective politician, I think, at dealing with the chaser. Because what he would do when he was opposition leader, when we would go to Campbelltown or wherever, I went to his house once, drove there, and he was like, oh, the chaser's in Western Sydney. The ABC knows where Western Sydney. How did you find us? And it was we could not use that footage because it was just he won. He kept winning.
Yeah. When you say he was the best, though, that was after the fact that the first interaction we had with him, he was drunk and smacked me in the head with a rubber bat.
He learned. That was the one clip. Whenever people did profile pieces for Mark Latham losing control, and this happened often in the subsequent, we always got a request. Can we use that footage of Mark Latham hitting Craig with the phone bat?
And ironically, I think it was that Latham at the time, I think he did it because he thought he knew the chaser, like he knew Chaser. We'd kind of gone into him before, and he didn't realise at that point we had a TV show.
He thought it was a university kind of sketch.
He thought he was just fucking around with us, and he was drunk, I think. And so and yet it was used as proof that he was a psychopath.
Yeah, so when he beat up the taxi driver and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, and so that was probably the thing we got the most royalties from over the years was that one clip of him with the phone bat. And again,
Thank you, Mark Latham.
I think that was my idea. That was, again, a metaphor brought into the real world. It's a beat up refugee.
Yes.
There you go.
We're here at Parliament House to give the politicians an opportunity to do what they really love to do. Bash a refugee. There are so many votes in it, and it's really fun. We're just wondering if you wanted to get like 5 or 10% more votes in the next election. What do you reckon? You keen on that?
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Well, what all you have to do is give a refugee a bash. That's the secret to it, all right?
Yes.
It's easy. Look at this. I've got One Nation preferences already. Just a little whack like that. Oh, come on. No. Come on. You're going to get somebody else? Did the Prime Minister say only he could do it? Do you want to have a go?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I wouldn't bash a refugee.
It's a very un-Australian response of yours, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Would you like a go?
Actually, this good-looking fellow doesn't look like a
Oh,
refugee.
is it? Good-looking refugee? That's not going to get you up in the polls. Just bash a refugee. Look, it's easy as anything.
Yeah.
And you can get 5 or 10% in the polls. What do you reckon? Look, give him a bash now, and we can change the laws later and make it so it's all right. You've got to take the opportunity up.
What's this?
Look at this. Here's a refugee. Here's something to bash him with. 10% in the polls. Just as easy as that. Come on, a swinging bat for a swinging seat.
No.
See? Easy as anything.
And I do think that actually there are some people who regard what you're doing as funny, and I think that's very sad.
There you go.
Give him
Very
a bash,
clever.
come on.
Good on you.
It's the Australian welcome.
Good on
He
you,
needs to
mate.
be welcomed to this country. Come on, Mr. Baird. Look at him. He's invading our country. You just kind of come through like this, good leverage. You give it a hard enough shot, we reckon you can get him to Nauru.
Right.
Come on.
Okay.
Bit of work from the back bench. Oh! Not me, I'm an Australian citizen.
Fucking idiot.
Well, that poor actor that played, he was a very good sport, the actor that played the refugee.
Yeah, and the irony of that was there were so few refugees in the country at that time that he was Greek.
Yeah, when I say refugee, he wasn't actually a refugee. He was just someone who we cast.
That was before. You get cancelled nowadays. Not for the sketch. You'd just be like, but that has to be played autonomously by a real refugee.
Took a role from a legitimate refugee actor. Yeah, he did.
Our gear is from Rode Microphones. We're part of the Acast Creator Network.
We'll have another one of these for you tomorrow morning. Catch you then.
See ya.